Okay. Yeah, it's going to be really simple, just down the case. Let's start on the first contention on miscalculation. A lot of problems here. First, you turn it as Payne finds that under an NFU, more nuclear proliferation is inevitable because if the U.S. passes an NFU, our allies would want to field their own nuclear capabilities to make up for the security that they lose, which means that the chance of miscalculation actually increases in their world because more states have nukes, which turns their link there. Second, you delink it. DLE 15 finds new and better radar technology makes miscalculation less and less likely, and constant communications between major powers and the presence of hotlines means miscalculation scenarios wouldn't pan out into escalation anyways, meaning that like their miscalculation is just like not going to happen. That's why empirically they give you like examples of miscalculation happening in the past, but none of them have one ever led to a nuke being launched, and two never will. Finally, miscalculations doesn't happen as Wallace 86 finds because nuclear war has super big consequences. The threshold of launch is also super high because leaders know that if they miscalculate, they're going to be nuked back anyways. So it's always in the state's interest to prevent miscalculation, for example, via double checking or hotlines. That is why every single incident that we've had, like quote unquote miscalculation before, it's always been stopped because people who launch the nukes always want to double check and see if miscalculation is happening or not and actually stop it from happening. And finally, never mind. Understanding the attention on China, there's a lot of problems here. First, remember, if we win our link C3, this also links in because the countries in the South China Sea that are threatened by China will want to field their own nuclear capabilities, especially if the U.S. isn't protecting them anymore. Second, there's no link into China repealing their NFU, which is their link into like these other countries proliferating, because JAMS 19 finds that China's NFU is very strong. There's no indication that they're going to get rid of it, which is the link that they specifically read. And finally, realize there's zero impact clarity insofar as they only tell you like proliferation happens, but there's absolutely zero impact that they give on proliferation. Let's take a look at the contention 3 about Iran. Even more problems. First, Iran literally is not nuclearizing the status quo. Their evidence is absolutely horrible. And tensions are solved anyways, because not only did the AP report that the Iranian president calls on Biden to return to the Iranian nuclear deal last week, but also Biden is also thinking to enter into the nuclear deal once he gets into office. That means like Iran doesn't nuclearize anyways, which in the status quo. Also, like I urge you to call for the evidence. It doesn't say that Iran's nuclearizing. It just says they threaten to nuclearize. But insofar as the nuclear deal is going to happen, that means their uniqueness is like completely wrong. And finally, you turn it right now. The U.S. has a nuclear umbrella, which makes it so that the cost escalation with Iran is too high and limits their aggression to symbolic gestures because they know they'll be crushed and destroyed if they lash out. The J Post 20 indicates if the U.S. backs down, the Iranians will try to expand and go for the goal of regional hegemony, which forces Israel and Saudi Arabia to contain them by like launching nukes at them, which triggers their own impact here. But also like Israel has nukes too, and Israel can probably like first strike them, which means their impact is ultimately not unique. Let's take a look at their C4 on North Korea. First of all, their link is just like super bad because realize Kim Jong-un is never going to negotiate with the United States unless the U.S. guarantees his complete security. As Condor 16 finds, Kim Jong-un saw what happened in Libya when the U.S. negotiated with their dictator and negotiated their denuclearization. And once their nukes were gone, the U.S. went in and like invaded and deposed of the dictator. So Kim Jong-un recognized that, which is why she finds that Kim will never negotiate without a guarantee of absolute security with the U.S., which is not guaranteed by the NFU and will probably never be guaranteed by the U.S. Insofar as Kim Jong-un is scared of the U.S.'s conventional military and our ability to take his regime out through like our conventional capabilities, that means he's never going to negotiate a nuclear deal or denuclearize, which means they lose their link there because the U.S. is always going to sanction him. But even if you don't buy that, realize that like insofar as the U.S. sanctions, like for example, look at Maduro, right? Like the U.S. sanctions like countries that they don't like and that are dictators. Insofar as North Korea, like Kim Jong-un is never going to give that up. Sanctions are probably going to stay on anyways. There's like zero impact clarity of what a nuclear deal means, which sanctions are being lifted. Insofar as most of the sanctions on North Korea are probably because he's like committing human right abuses, which they don't solve for, we would say there's no impact here.
All right. Let's just wait for Ishan's rebuttal. Does anyone have like any questions about Hannah's rebuttals, or like, did anyone?
Can I get like maybe like 2 minutes of because I would usually use cross and stuff, and I would.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay, I think Hannah might have to go. So bye.
Yeah,
Hannah.
I got a blast. Bye.
Does anyone have any questions on Hannah's rebuttal? Okay. I'll take that as a no. So we'll wait for Ishan. I guess while Ishan does that, I can just give you guys a rundown of what we're gonna do. So basically, what everyone's gonna do is everyone's gonna give a summary speech, and that's gonna be 3 minutes. And basically, after Ishan gives his rebuttal, obviously. But in the summary speech, what you want to do is you want to make strategic decisions. So like for all of y'all can choose to go AF or you can go neg. Yeah, but like hopefully we have either an even amount of people or everyone just goes AF. So basically, if you are on the AF side, you're going to have to choose to collapse, and we've talked about collapsing, and basically it's like you're gonna have to choose one of the 3 contentions that Ishan read, right? Probably more like there's 4 arguments. So miscalc, China, Iran, or North Korea. And what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to extend. So like what's really important in summary is extensions. And you have to make sure you're extending not only like the argument name, like, oh, we're gonna extend China and just like leave it at that, right? Like you have to tell your judge, especially for lay judges, you really want to like relay out your argument because lay judges are probably gonna like forget if you don't repeat yourself 10,000 times, right? You have to explain the link and at least the link and the impact, right? So you have to say, for example, if I'm gonna go for Iran, you have to say, okay, Iran is only nuclearizing right now because of the US. That's Fisher 15, right? But an NFU would solve because Kalina 16 tells you an NFU removes the US threat and Iran no longer feels like it needs to nuclearize. And then you're going to extend the impact, which is, and the impact is if Iran got a nuke, Israel would strike Iran first, which TERS 13 finds would kill 6 million people, but then Trebenko 9 finds it would lead to an entire Persian Gulf War, right? So you're going to extend that. But not only are you going to have to extend, but you're also going to have to frontline, right? Like, let's say Ishan doesn't respond to something that Hannah said on Iran. Hopefully he does, but maybe he might not have time, right? Then you're going to have to respond to the front line. You're going to have to frontline whichever contention you go for, right? Like, for example, if you went for Iran, you'd have to respond to Hannah's argument that, like, Iran and Biden are going to have, like, a nuclear deal, which will solve everything. And then, so not only do you have to choose an argument, like you don't only have to choose one, but you can choose like 2, but like you have to do whatever you can within 3 minutes. But not only do you have to like extend something on your case, you also have to extend your defense on your opponent's case, right? So let's say Ishan gives a really fire rebuttal and he has like 20 responses against like the neg case. Then you're going to have to choose which ones were the best, and you're going to have to extend those into summary in order for them to be considered later in the round, right? So whatever you haven't said in summary, you can't say in final focus, which is like the last speech, which is what the judges vote off of, right? So what I would say is that like the most important arguments you're going to be extending here. So if you don't extend any defense in summary, then basically what the neg gets to do is they can just like say, yeah, my opponents didn't extend any of their rebuttals, so like you can just drop all of them and like we're gonna win, right? Like they probably shouldn't do that, but sometimes they do that. So you do want to extend some rebuttals. So for example, if I were to do a summary and let's say I was on a F, I'd probably like go for North Korea. I'd be like, oh, first the US is pushing North Korea to make the first move, but they won't. But an NFU will be the first move to bring diplomacy, and this diplomacy will lead to a nuclear deal that will lift sanctions that are killing 10 million people. My opponents say that Kim Jong-un will never negotiate, but what I would say is like Kim Jong-un's like elite circle, like they're all so hurt by sanctions that like he, like once the US is no longer like an imminent threat of using nukes on him, he's going to want to negotiate because he's running out of money, and like without money he can't keep his regime afloat anyways, right? And then I would go on to the neg case. I'd be like, oh yeah, extend my partner's third response to their contention 1, blah, 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 right? And then at the end of the speech, or perhaps when you're on your case, what you really want to do, what's really important in summary is to weigh. So you have to say, you have to take whatever argument you're going for and explain why it's the most important in the round. For example, on North Korea, what I might say is that like, Judge, you're always going to vote for North Korea first before everything else because these 10 million people are literally dying right now, right? Like, everything that the neg is saying about South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and China are like all speculative. Like, is this war even going to happen? But 10 million people are dying right now, and if you could solve for those, you should prioritize these lives first over anything else, right? So basically, summary is 3 minutes. You want to extend some of your case, extend some of your opponent's case, and then weigh. All right. Now Ishan is gonna spit a fire rebuttal.
I am. Okay. I put a speech doc because I will be spreading like pretty fast. So I put a speech doc link in the chat. You guys can click on that. That will be exactly what I'll be reading, other than my front lines, because my front lines will be like intuitive. I don't have enough time to write them down. Okay, cool. Is everybody like good? Or just make sure you're ready. All right.
Wait, sorry, what are front lines again?
Front lines are responses to what Hannah said, like me defending my own arguments. So my order is going to be the front lines first, and then I'll go on to this speech doc here. Cool. Yeah, all right. Time starts. No, all right. Hannah gives a couple of responses to miscalculation. First of all, this idea that prolif is inevitable, umbrella is gone. I'll get onto that on our side of the floor. But then she talks about radar technology and how miscalculation is solved by that. I would contend that radar technology doesn't take into account these new missiles that are being developed that can operate at the speed of sound, or 20 times the speed of sound. But then even if you don't believe that, she says that that in all the instances of miscalculation, we've never seen one actually occur. I would contend that Hannah's literally just saying that it's fine because we're getting lucky. I would contend that we shouldn't try to be lucky. Instead, we should try to solve the problem altogether so we don't have to risk the chance ever. But then, okay, on to Iran. Iran not nuclearizing. She talks about Biden and how there's going to be a nuclear deal. I would contend that another Republican president like Trump will pull out of the nuclear deal. It's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. But then even if you don't believe that, Iran has tripled the amount of nuclear-enriched uranium they have in the last year. That's Iran literally nuclearizing. That takes out her idea that Iran hasn't nuclearized. But then UK, Ireland, and 2 other UN countries have already accused Ireland of having a nuclear weapon right now. That's the volatile tensions that you're going to be looking to demonstrate that there is like high suspicion there. But then lastly, on North Korea, they say that Kim Jong-un isn't going to negotiate. They say that an NFU would get him to the negotiating table. At that point, then we can talk about taking down these the threat to North Korea. Then we can talk about taking down the sanctions. Okay, but then on to my opponent's case. Couple responses to allied proliferation at the, which is the general argument they go for. First of all, delink American troops on military bases in allied nations, meaning that any nuclear strike against our allies would kill U.S. personnel, resulting in a U.S. nuclear strike. But then delink again because allies won't proliferate. The consequences are too great. CAC 20 writes that the financial, political, and security consequences of acquiring a nuclear weapon are strong deterrents against nuclear proliferation amongst our allies. But then delink again because RAFE 16 finds that although our allies may initially have concerns about the transition, they're highly likely to accept it without themselves proliferating because it would in no way weaken the U.S.'s military preparedness to confront a non-nuclear threats to their safety. CAC 20 adds that a NFU policy will have no effect on the ability of the United States to deter its allies' security with its robust conventional forces and the threat of nuclear retaliation in response to nuclear attack. That's why Feder 18 concludes that our nuclear umbrella commitments will not be undermined in any way by NFU. We could still use nuclear weapons after our allies were nuked. But then alternative causation, because even if they do develop nuclear weapons, it is for alternative reasons. Brewer 20 finds that because of the foreign policy decisions made by the U.S., our allies are starting to doubt the U.S. security commitment and no longer think they can be dependent on us. That's why we see, as of a month ago, South Korea and Taiwan are already developing their own nuclear weapons. Their argument is non-unique. Weighing. With this means that an NFU won't be the catalyst for our allies getting nukes, as allies are likely to accept an NFU, and even so, they are gaining nukes because of the prior U.S. policy decisions. Once an NFU is passed, the overall chance for war decreases, and this will adequately reassure allies that they have no need for proliferation. But then on their first contention about Japan and South Korea, Mosakuchi 17 adds that it's politically unpopular. 82% of citizens in Japan and South Korea oppose. The politicians will have to oppose because the citizens oppose. That's not going to change. But then Scott 18 finds that Japan would not proliferate even if the U.S. adopted an NFU because the public and politicians vehemently opposed nuclearization after World War II. Additionally, Japan's own constitution writes that it may not keep a conventional or military arsenal. But then on Saudi Arabia proliferation, Saudi Arabia will never proliferate even with the U.S. Al-Marashi 10 of University of Madrid explains that even in a world with dramatic deterioration of relations between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, where U.S. security guarantees are no longer credible, Saudi Arabia would still not proliferate because of the economic pressures. But then second, removing military presence does not mean we end all cooperation. Kalanick 17 explains that the most valuable contributions the U.S. makes to Saudi Arabia's domestic security, such as sharing intelligence or training their forces, would continue even if the U.S. ended our nuclear umbrella. But then the NTI finds that Saudi Arabia is party to many non-proliferation treaties and doesn't have plans to proliferate. But if Iran proliferated and acquired a nuclear weapon, the Saudis would quickly follow, meaning my opponents have to prove that Iran won't proliferate for any unique offense here. But then turn, because Glazer 13 of the Cato Institute explains that Iran nuclearization is caused by nearby U.S. bases in the region. By removing presence, by removing U.S. presence, Iran ends proliferation. But then onto the South China Sea. Fox of the National Interest writes in 2019 that China has been able to avoid an all-out conflict in the region by taking out small bursts of action that are unlikely to cause any detrimental fallout. This is especially because the cost of war with America and its East Asian allies would not be worth the potential territorial gains. Instead, China is operating from a rational standpoint and conducts its actions based on the calculated consideration of consequences. Dealing because oh shit, yeah. So
Anyways, don't flow what he said on China because it was over time.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right. I already explained y'all what a summary is. Does anyone have any questions about what they should do on a summary? Also, Ishan went really fast. So like, is there anything that like Ishan said that like didn't make sense?
Yeah, I sent the speech doc link in the chat, but I can explain anything I said.
Can you recap like what a summary is? Because I kind of came late, or if you explained it already, I didn't really catch it.
Okay, so basically a summary is like it's exactly what the speech sounds like, right? It's a summary of the entire round. And let's say you're on AF, you're going to extend some of your case's contentions. So let's say you go for like your contention 1 on miscalc and your contention 2 on like specifically China, not Iran, right? So you'd extend these 2 arguments, and what you have to do when you extend the arguments is you have to extend the link and the impact. So you have to say why it's going to happen. So for China, you're going to say a U.S. first use means China's getting rid of their NFU, and then and then your link into like your impact is that like this would lead to a U.S.-China arms race, which would lead to a entire South China Sea arms race. But the NFU would solve because like then China won't remove its own NFU. And then you're just going to extend South China Sea arms race, right? And then you're going to also have to frontline it. So like Ishan didn't specifically respond to China. So if you wanted to go for China, you'd have to respond to the rebuttals that Hannah put on his case. So you're going to have to say like, China is literally moving away from its NFU right now. Like, don't believe what my opponents say, right?
I dropped China because just non-unique China. I read responses to South China Sea that said that China would never become aggressive in the South China Sea.
But that was overtime. But anyways, it doesn't matter. Right?
Nicole.
Like, it's strategic choices to like decide what you're going to go for in rebuttal. But then like let's say you're still AF, right? And then on Hannah's case, so on my case, you're going to extend some of Ishan's rebuttals to each of the contentions on neg. So you're probably going to extend something like, oh yeah, economic backlash means no one's ever going to proliferate. So just neg doesn't have a case, right? So yeah, and I also talked that you have to weigh. So explain why your argument is the most important in the round. Like say, oh, a Chinese like proliferation would be really bad for like global stability and kill like billions of people. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so does anyone have any more questions?
Like any questions about what I was saying at all?
Okay, so how about now we can pick sides. So who wants to give an AF summary? Y'all can just like use the raise hand button or like type in the chat or unmute.
And how about Nicole and I can both give like outlines for how we think the summary should go based on how the round is going.
Bro, why are you guys' life's over? You're not even in high school yet.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna start calling on people. Juliana, do you want to go AF or neg?
Neg, but I will not go first.
Okay, neg. Okay, so Juliana's gonna go neg. I'm just write that down.
Come on, guys. AF is clearly winning this round right now.
Yeah, you should make strategic choices in the summary, like the strategic choice that Ishan made to drop China.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a
Jacqueline,
strategic choice.
do you want to go af
Wait.
or neg?
Wait. Ishan dropped China?
Yeah,
I didn't
Ishan
drop
dropped
China. I
He
did.
didn't.
You can make cross applications if you want.
I know
Yeah,
you
like-
China. I said that China will never become aggressive in the South China Sea, which
But
takes
that was
my
overtime.
argument
That
out.
was overtime, so we can't flow that.
Nicole,
Also,
stop this shit.
all of the
You didn't-
overview responses are like somewhat responsive to China
Yeah,
as well.
I
So you
overview
can just like
responsive to that too.
yeah.
Anyways,
Just go directly with those.
I can do af, but can I also not go first?
yeah. Okay, you don't have to go first. Okay, Jacqueline will go af. All right. John Gunn. Af or neg?
I'm still thinking.
Come on,
Okay.
I gave you all my cards, so you can like see them there, and you can just,
William. Oh yeah, by the way, in
But even
summary,
that takes a
especially
lot of
like
Time.
in summary, you can like, since Ishan didn't like have time to say his China responses, you can still like bring up to an extent some new stuff in summary. So
hey,
you can-
Nicole didn't cut me off, so It's-
okay, whatever. So af or neg, John Gunn?
Nay.
Neg, okay.
But isn't it? Wait, is it about Ishan's work or is it about yours?
Neg is me, so you're gonna defend my side.
Oh.
Oh wait, can I actually do neg if that's
Okay.
your
Yeah, okay. Oh
I
wow,
was
so
doing nay the whole
popular.
time. And I
Okay,
was
so
doing
you
nay
wanna
the
go
whole
af?
time.
Okay.
it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter which side you pick. We'll just
Okay, and then William, which side do you want to go?
Neg.
Neg, okay. And then how about Ethan?
neg?
Neg. All right, everyone's going neg. Look at
All right. I'll give an ass summary then. Just to
I'll go af because nobody's going af.
yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
great.
wait. I don't know because you're like M Sing. Like, who are you?
Oh yeah, I'm Miles.
Oh, Miles.
Miles.
Okay,
It's
Miles will go af.
I'm not in
Amazing.
BSD anymore, so my BSD account got taken down. So.
Okay,
Gotcha.
Miles, we're gonna win
Okay.
together.
So
Okay.
I don't think we have enough time to go like everyone in one room. So how about Juliana, Jacqueline, and John Gunn? The three of you go with Ishan to room 1.
Oh.
And then William and Miles can stay with me.
Okay, cool.
And Bomberger, you can choose which side you want to go to.
All right, for sure.
All right. So the class ends at 4:30. 3 people, that's like, I'll say like 10 minutes of speeches, right? So I'll give you guys 5 minutes to prepare. Let's go. Let's get this.
I'm not sure what to do.
Okay. So all you have to do is you have your float, right? And William, you're going neg. So you're just going to pick contentions that you want to extend on neg, right? So I have 3 contentions: South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and China, right? I suggest that everyone probably extends at least China, and you can choose like either South Korea or Saudi, right? Because Ishan really didn't say anything against China, so you can just like extend the argument. When you're extending, is you're gonna say, right now China's aggression is increasing, right? And this is like crucially the tipping point, because if the US were to adopt an NFU, which is exactly what like China wants, China's going to see this as a sign of appeasement. So like the US is letting China do whatever it wants, and China's going to become more aggressive and invade places in the South China Sea like Taiwan, or like some small islands in the South China Sea, and that would lead to a quasi world war which would kill 80 million people. So you can say that, right? 80 mil dead. Yeah. So you're gonna extend the link and the impact. So you're just gonna extend the contention idea, and then you're gonna extend defense on Ishan's case. So you're gonna extend what Hannah said in her rebuttal, and you're basically gonna be like, "Oh, my opponent said that like we can't always be lucky, but like we've been lucky so many times, and that's because miscalc never happens. So like miscalc will never happen, right?" So you're just extending defense on their case. Anyways, you'll have 3 more minutes. All right, y'all. I know that was a quick, short 7 minutes, but that is around the time, less than the time that you'll get for a real round. So, Miles, can I ask you to go first since you're going AF?
All right, sure. Mine's gonna be kind of short because I
No
didn't have much time to prepare. But here guys. So we should develop an NFU because our policy that we don't have an NFU is kind of forcing countries to develop a nuclear arsenal because if we don't have the first use policy, it's possible that we can nuke a country. So they have to develop a nuclear arsenal to kind of put pressure back into us, so then it makes sure we have a less chance of striking them. So unlike the neg states that developing an NFU will actually not increase the number of countries that develop a nuclear arsenal. This is why, because when we put in a no first use policy, our kind of like our adversaries will kind of will have like less pressure to develop nuclear arsenals themselves because we're not pressuring them with nuclear power unless they don't need the power to pressure us back. And that means that and since a lot of our adversaries are also adversaries of our allies, that means our allies don't have much reason to develop a nuclear arsenal as well because they don't have the nuclear pressure from their enemies. So then they don't really need much for a nuclear arsenal. That means when we develop a no first use policy, less countries will develop a nuclear arsenal and thus decrease the chance for miscalculation. That we stated that our first contention in our when less nuclear arsenals are built or no first use policies developed, there's a less likelihood of miscalculation, which could save possibly thousands of lives, well, millions of lives. And then so an example of that is North Korea, as we stated in the third contention. So basically, our lack of a no first use policy kind of like pressures North Korea, so they want to develop a they want nuclear arsenal really fast so they can pressure us back. And we've been trying to like fear them into not developing it, but the more we put on fear, the more they're just going to develop because they need the pressure back at us to decrease our chance. The only way to solve that is developing a no first use to take off our pressure. That way, they won't have the pressure to develop a nuclear arsenal. Yeah, that's kind of. I'm done. I don't.
Yeah, that was great. Do you have any responses that you want to extend from Ishan's rebuttal? On the neg case.
Ishan's rebuttal. Okay. Let's see. Not really.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Let's see. Let's have who's going next? Let's have William go next. William.
I'm not really sure how to do it.
It's okay. It's a learning process. So just go ahead and I'll give everyone feedback after we're done. So whatever you have, go ahead.
Okay. So the U.S. should not adopt an NFU, because if the U.S. adopts an NFU, then the China will see it as we can freely stroll around and do stuff, and then so they go around the Southeast China Sea or something, and then start taking over land like Taiwan and other small islands. So also
do you have anything you want to extend from Hannah's rebuttal on Ishan's case?
So, like, no.
No? Okay. Well, that's okay. That was a pretty good summary. Okay. So, now let's go to Ethan. Whatever you have is good.
I don't have a lot, and I didn't really get what summary was, so. Yeah.
It's okay. Just whatever you have right now can work.
If the U.S. does not have an NFU policy, China will become more and more aggressive. This will lead to invasion to other countries and could lead to a global war. And China is currently testing new weapons that could lead to more aggression. And
Do you have anything you want to extend?
Having an NFU will not make other countries have more nukes, because they will feel like they will feel less pressure to make nuclear weapons, because they are. I didn't really get that part.
That's okay.
Yeah. And when NFU is made, the nuclear attack probability will decrease because everyone will have nukes.
Okay, that's great. So I'm just gonna give a really quick 3-minute summary. I'll try to go slower so you all can understand, and then I'll compare my summary to y'all's and give you some feedback, right? So, I'm, since I was neg and, in the beginning, so I'm just gonna defend the neg case, all right? My time begins now. The first way that you guys can vote for us is on contention 3 about China. We tell you that China is becoming increasingly aggressive right now. The only thing that's deterring China from invading other countries is what Wagon 1220 tells you, which is U.S. deterrence through its nuclear umbrella. However, once the U.S. removes its NFU, China sees this as a sign of appeasement, so they'll begin to invade countries in the South China Sea, and that would kill 80 million people immediately because of a quasi-world war, as the U.S. will be drawn in with their alliances fighting China, and they're the biggest superpowers. The reason why you're going to be voting off of this instead of any other impact in the round is because on sheer magnitude alone, 80 million outweighs every single one of their impacts. Even if you add their entire case together, one nuke kills maybe 6 million people, and then their contention 2 about Iran kills 6 million people, and then their C4 about North Korea kills 10 million people. If you add it, it's only 20 million people. So we would say 80 million completely outweighs. But then they also didn't respond to this contention at all. So you're seeing a clean flow. There's 100% probability here. They didn't even talk about it. You're giving us clean access to this. But then second, let's look at their case. What they're trying to tell you is that miscalc can still happen because new missiles, like hypersonic missiles, don't have that advanced tech. What we would tell you is that their hypersonic missiles, obviously the radar tech still applies to them, because it's the radar tech that matters, and not the radar is attached to the missile or something. But then they also tell you that we're just suggesting that oh, we're super lucky, so it's okay to not care about miscalculation. But what we're saying is that miscalculation never happens, even with even though we've miscalculated in the past, no one's ever died, and we've never launched a nuke, because the threshold for launching a nuke is so high. Miscalculation will never lead to any deaths, even if you do believe that it happens. But then on their contention 3 about Iran, the only thing they say is that oh, this Iran-Biden nuclear deal would be a short-term solution for a long-term harm. What we would tell you is that Iran specifically doesn't even want to nuclearize, but even if it were to nuclearize, we would say it's not because of the US, because it's in the non-proliferation treaty, which means the US can't nuke them, but rather because Israel has nukes. So we would tell you there's other reasons why Iran is nuclearizing. But then on North Korea, they literally don't even respond to this. All they say is that negotiations are good, even if they don't lead to anything. But what we would tell you is that Kim Jong-un will never try to negotiate, because the US can never give a security guarantee. So overall, you're seeing they're not really winning their case. But then let's look another place you can vote for us. We would say you can vote for us us on Saudi Arabia, because they only say that like Saudi Arabia will never proliferate. They completely misunderstand our argument. Peabody 19 tells you the U.S. nuclear umbrella serves as a U.S. commitment to Saudi's security. However, when the U.S. declines in its security promise to Saudi Arabia lashes out in the form of proxy wars to stop Iran. And this has killed millions of people empirically in the Yemen war. So we're telling you they completely misunderstand this statement. You can completely outweigh them because there's 80 million dead from China, and also millions will die from another Yemen war. Okay, so that might have been a little too fast, but let me just like go over what I said, right? So I said that first I extended China, right? And what I did at the bottom, I was just like, we're winning on magnitude, right? And I talked about weighing before. Weighing is just like you're comparing your arguments and saying why yours is more important, right? So I told, right, like, so magnitude is just like numbers, right? Like, so I am winning in magnitude just means I have bigger numbers. And I like, you know, I did like some math in the middle. I was just like 80 million is bigger than like 6 million plus 6 million plus 10 million, which is like 22 million, right? So even if I only win China, I'm arguing that I can win the entire round just because of China, right? So that's why weighing is really important, because it allows you to spend less time extending more arguments and instead just win the round with one argument that you're going for. Now, what I would say Miles did really well is that he really extended the AF case really well, right? He talked about how if our adversaries, you said that like U.S. first use means others like begin to proliferate, but if we have an NFU, we'll like solve all of that. And you made a really, really good, like I would also call this weighing, right? Although you just kind of like made an analysis. You said if our adversaries stop proliferating, that means like our allies don't feel any need to proliferate either, because like if there's no threat, even if the US isn't protecting you, you don't feel the need to build a nuke. And I think that's really, really good weighing that you can use, right? You can say, as long as we solve for our adversaries, it'll solve for our allies as well. So I think that's another kind of weighing that you can use, kind of like a solvency weighing, like I solve for their case as well. So I think that's where you did a really, really good job. And I also thought you did a really good job on like extending the North Korea argument and also the miscalculation argument, right? Like it made a lot of sense to me. What I would say in the future that you could do is perhaps like have your arguments a little bit more like in order, right? Because you talked about like, oh, US first use is like means other people stop proliferating, right? And I think you're referring to like Iran and China here, but you don't really like specifically say our contention to, right? I think it would help if you said like on Iran, or like you can vote for us on China, or like our contention to. And then you kind of like morph into like the miscalc argument, but you aren't really like making it clear which argument you're going to move on to next, right? Because when a judge is taking down notes, they're trying to like flow in order, but you jump from like argument to argument, and it's kind of hard. So I would suggest like if you're going to try to extend your whole case, you're going to go in order, like miscalc, China, and then North Korea. Or if you want to go out of order, that's okay. Like what I did contention 3, then I went to their case, then I went back onto my case. But I like signposted, right? And what signpost means is just like telling the judge where you're going. So I told them the first way you can vote for us is on contention 3, right? I told them contention 3. And then I told them, let's look at my opponent's case, right? And then I said, let's look at our contention 2, right? So that it's very clear where I'm going. And I would just suggest that everyone does a little bit more of signposting. The same for William and Ethan. I think you both like really extended China well. Like you explained it that like China is becoming more aggressive. This is the tipping point. I think the more important thing is that everyone has to keep in mind that you have to extend your impact, right? So Miles, you did talk about how like US NFU means like it takes North Korea the pressure off to build nukes, but you don't talk about how like the real impact, which is, okay, so if North Korea were to stop developing its nukes, what would actually happen? And we tell you what happens is sanctions will be lifted, which means 10 million people will be saved, right? And then on the other hand, for William and Ethan, you guys do talk about like China starts taking over places and there's going to be a war, but you don't tell me how many people actually die, right? Like I think lay judges, parent judges really like if you just throw in their face like 80 million people will die, they're like, oh, 80 million, right? So you want to make it very clear. At the end of the day, if you extend your entire contention, but you don't extend the impact, there's really no reason why you should be extending it, because then there's no reason for the judge to vote off of you, right? Like you just say, oh, there's going to be a war, like how many people will actually die, right? Especially if you have a piece of evidence that tells you 80 million people will die. I think it's a really good thing to just extend that. And then also so for everyone in general, I would suggest that you have to go more off. Not only do you have to talk about your own case and defend it, but you also have to talk about your opponent's case, right? Because although like, if you do good enough weighing, you can just win the round with like one contention. Sometimes judges are like, oh, I don't like that contention, or like I don't like what you said, right? So you still want to extend some defense on your opponent's case. So that's what I did in the middle. I'm like, let's look at my opponent's case. They tell you that like Iran Biden nuclear deal won't matter, but I tell you there's other reasons why Iran is nuclearizing, such as Israel, so it's not unique, right? So I'm still putting rebuttals on their case, so the judge can't just like, oh yeah, well the opponents didn't say anything against their opponents, so like I just believe the whole case, right? So you'd never want that to happen. You want to say like some stuff on each contention that your opponents are going for. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before I let you guys go? Okay. Well, I'll take that as a no. We are over time. So,